Welcome back to the Morning Brew. Time to mind your digital business. I'm being joined by Keron Rose, the Digipreneur. Am I saying that correctly?
You're absolutely correct.
Welcome to the program, Keron.
Thank you for having me as always.
So today we're going to be talking about podcasting.
Yes.
Why?
So, you know what? Podcasting have risen in popularity over the years.
Yeah.
And I believe it's one of the platforms that is very underutilized across the entire Caribbean region. And one of the key reasons that I wanted to talk about podcasting today is because people keep asking about, they want to start their podcast. They're also not sure whether or not to start a podcast, given the fact that, okay, everybody thinks social media is the way to go, right? But what happens on social media tends to stay on social media. Now, social media also gives you bite-sized clips of information, which can be taken out of context, right? Mm-hmm. People are forgoing the fact that you also have to produce long-form content to give full context. So with podcasting, one of the most important reasons why you want to do it is that it allows you to dive in deep on any of the topics, and it's the only medium of communication that allows people to passively consume. So when do we listen to podcasts? We could be driving
to work.
Right.
Doing
cooking.
Yeah,
laundry.
Exactly. In fact, people say they don't listen to radio anymore. Anytime I tell people I listen to radio, like, still you doing that? I be listening to podcasts.
Yeah, you listen to podcasts, right? And this is why a lot of media houses that are producing radio shows are now turning segments into podcast episodes to be listening on demand. So yeah, that's one of the key reasons why people should be getting into podcasts and thinking.
And you're correct, because while podcasts have been exploding, they're not a lot of Caribbean podcasts. I mean, I feel like this is across the board in social media. They say it's easier for you to do it, and it has democratized the creation of media. But Caribbean people are still not, when I think about the people who I look at on YouTube and the podcasts I listen to, they're not made here. They're not made in the region, which is a problem.
So podcasting is the only platform that actually has a certified international body that ranks the podcasts in every single country on Apple Podcasts, right? So if you go to a platform called chartable.com, you're going to be able to see all of the rankings of the podcast episodes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. The reason that's important is because when you're looking at the various categories, you almost never see Caribbean podcasts even ranking, but we are consuming a lot. So when you look at the Trinidad podcast, when you look at the Trinidad charts, you're seeing all of the podcasts that we consume, but we're just not seeing any Caribbean podcasts. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the biggest misconceptions. We consume a lot, but we're not producing the content.
We've always been heavy consumers, but not heavy creators, which is a problem. So how, if I'm interested in starting my podcast, what are some of the things that I should be doing? Because I think a lot of people think, well, equipment.
Yeah.
And then content.
Yeah.
Or strategy.
So the beautiful thing about podcasts as well, it's also the easiest piece of content you're able to produce. So when you think about video, you at least need to have a good phone. Some people think you got to get a camera. If it's written, you got to have a website or be blogging on a platform that allows for it. But with podcasts, at a bare minimum, you need a recorder, right? That could be your phone, that could be an app, and a mic. It could be your headset mic at a bare minimum, right? Now, if you can spend at least a 50 US or 100 US and get yourself a decent USB mic to your computer, that'll get you some better audio quality, and then you could record the podcast episodes to your computer.
And Audacity is free, I think.
And Audacity, right? Audacity is free, good. Audacity is free to allow you to record the episode. Yeah. But then the most important thing is, how do you get your podcast to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other platforms?
Yeah.
You need a podcast host. So you could use a podcast host, like I use Podbean, there's Buzzsprout, there's Anchor, there's a wide variety of podcast hosts that allow you to upload your audio files, and then they will distribute the audio files to every single podcast medium on the planet. So after you've produced your podcast and you're looking through, where are the sources, where are people coming from, you're seeing things like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, and the list goes on with how people are consuming your podcast.
Now, all that's well and good, right? Mm-hmm. But a $50 US mic, excuse me, is a little costly. I probably have to pay. I mean, what's the lowest range? What's the range for podcast hosts? Like, it
starts as free. It starts as free, right? Every podcast host has a free plan, right? And they allow you X amount of hours a month for you to upload, right? The basic plan starts at around $9 US a month for a podcast host. Now, the $50 US mic, you don't have to do that, right? That is something you can upgrade to. So as I was saying in the beginning. But
really what I was alluding to is, can you make money from podcasting? Or is it, you know?
That is another question that comes up a lot. Obviously, people are thinking about the bag, right? So when it comes to,
because you've already told us how to get paid from PayPal, you know. So since I know how to get that US dollars and set up my PayPal account, can I run those dollars from my podcast?
Yes. So there's many ways that you can monetize a podcast, right? So one of the ways that you could monetize a podcast is you're able to turn on ads within your podcast. So every podcast host allows you to automatically run ads during the program, and they'll pay you, right? Then you could also do subscriptions. So you could set up anyone, Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon, any one of those as well, right? And one of the easiest ways, or one of the best ways you want to monetize is because you are putting in your expertise or creating conversations, there are people that are going to want to sponsor episodes, right? So people could sponsor episodes. And again, once you're producing really good content, that's one of the easier ways to make some money. And then also, if you're somebody where you're doing a podcast for a business, so you're talking about your expertise, when people listen to you dive into topics, people are going to contact you and say, hey, just listen to the episode. Can we bring you in for a consultation, or can we book your services? So that's a couple of ways to monetize your podcast. But that last point, that's one of the key reasons why I want to see more businesses producing podcasts, because it allows you to dive in deep on topics, and you have customers that are going to be able to reach out to you and book your services.
It's reaching deeper and building relationships based on the conversation that you're having, using your expertise to draw in people and say, oh, okay, that's a very interesting point, and I like his philosophy on XYZ. Let me call and engage in a business relationship with that person. As a podcast listener, and speaking to Caribbean potential podcasters, what kind of subjects do you want to, I mean, you just said business, but outside of that, what kind of subjects do you want to see us engaging with digitally in the podcast arena?
Anything. At this point, any conversation is good conversation. I think the key thing is have a point of view, right? Have a point of view, regardless of what that point of view is. Come on a podcast, have a point of view, and dive in deep on the topic. We are so accustomed now to, you're going on social media and you're trying to do 10-second videos, 30-second videos with no substance, with no context. The points that you're making are very, very limited. Podcasting allows you to dive in deep. And the thing is, with podcasts, the #1 consumed podcasts range anywhere from 30 minutes to 90 minutes, right? And the most popular podcast in the world, Joe Rogan, 3 hours.
Yeah, boy.
Right? So when we hear things like, oh, people don't want to consume long-form content, that's only on social media. Right?
That's not even true, because YouTube used to have short videos, and now videos are getting longer and longer.
YouTube videos have been long. Now they have YouTube Shorts. So if you want shorts, there's short content. YouTube videos are long. So I'm glad you make that point, because people keep on thinking when they're producing content, oh, it needs to be short, 10 seconds, 30 seconds. People's attention spans are not there. No, we go and we sit down in a Marvel movie in the theaters and watch a 3-hour movie. People's attention spans are only short for bad content, and also when they're on social media because they're scrolling through. Podcasts allow you, again, press play, you do something else, you passively consume.
But there are a few Caribbean podcasters. What mistakes do you think the ones who are operating?
Consistency.
Okay.
Consistency. So you will see everybody start off hot and sweaty. Right?
I was about to say that.
Everybody starts off hot and sweaty. They'll get to the episode 7, and historically, amongst podcasts, 80% of podcasts die after the 7th episode. because people realize, oh wow, this is actually work. Like, it takes time to produce the podcast. So with Caribbean podcasters, the majority of them, it is consistency. You start off hot and sweaty, you might get an episode a week, and then after the 7th episode, now it's every 2 weeks, and then it's every month, and then it's, oh yeah, I forgot we have a podcast episode, and you're dropping an episode every 2 or 3 months. You're never going to monetize or grow this thing.
And consistency is the key across all social media. Keron, what is your tech tip for this week?
My tech tip for this week is I want you guys to start looking at podcasts, start thinking about the types of microphones that you can go and look at. So particularly, we know we live in noisy areas, right? We get people who will run and look at the Yeti microphones.
Yes.
The Yeti microphones tend to pick up a lot of background noise because they're geared towards omnidirectional mics.
Yes.
And they're going to pick up every single thing in your house. You don't want that. When you're looking to start a podcast, look at condenser microphones. What they do is they focus in on your voice immediately in front of you and filter out a lot of the background noises. Trust me, that's a big help because we have noisy neighbors. And when I mean noisy neighbors, I'm talking about we have the dogs barking.
No, they always know when I have a Zoom. Yeah. They always know. They always know.
We got the roosters crowing, doing their thing. Yeah.
Mr. DeMille, is this my camera? Yeah, let's talk now. Keron Rose, it's a pleasure talking to you as usual. I'm hoping to see a positive explosion in regular podcasting from the region soon.
Thank you for having me again.
Of course. We are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to focus and talk about cancer protection, early screening, detection. You know, we have this conversation all the time because it's a necessary one.